attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
Several shots were fired as President Kennedy's motorcade passed through downtown Dallas.
None of us will ever forget this day. Yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world.
This is Houston, say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do to your country.
I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Welcome to the Hagmann Daily Show, weekdays 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And now your hosts, Joe Hagmann and Jon Robberson.
Hello and welcome to this Monday edition, April 30th, 2018 of the Hagmann Daily Show. We got a lot to get into. John is with me. We're going to be joined by Liz Crokin in about 25-30 minutes, and we're going to cover some news until we get to her. And John, I guess there's a place I want to start. We did not talk about this before the show. There's a lot going on with Israel and Iran right now. I just see the Drudge Report and other reports on a few internet sites out there, a few forums, and it looks like President Netanyahu is giving a statement that there is a significant development regarding the Iranian nuclear agreement. And it also says on the front here, Drudge, Israel ready to bomb Iran if necessary. Netanyahu to address country with drastic news. Israel hits Iranian recruitment base in Syria, causes earthquake, 26 dead. And there are also reports that the Israeli stock market is down a lot after the announcement by Netanyahu. And that is still ongoing, apparently. He's still speaking. So we don't have the whole picture yet. But it appears that as tensions between North and South Korea seem to be de-escalating in the U.S., and we've reached some kind of agreement over there and made significant progress, it seems that the Middle East just is still plagued with war, and we see it in many countries there. And why is it always when we see a de-escalation in one area, you have this other area where the violence seems to pick up? But it's something we're going to keep our eyes on. And I mean, we always talk a lot about what U.S. wars would look like, but what would a military conflict between Israel and Iran look like, and how would that involve the U.S. and the rest of the world? I don't know. This is a tricky situation, John. I'd say just as much as Syria, and it obviously will involve Syria, as that is a battleground, a war zone, as it has been for years, and you have both Israel and Iran fighting in Syria via proxy with each other. So there's a lot going on here in the Middle East, and I think we should be watching this very closely, especially with the increased rhetoric between Israel and Iran. I don't know, John. What do you think?
Indeed, we should. You know, something that occurred to me as I was listening to really a great piece of analysis by our friends Stephen Minking and Bill Chapman. They did on The Objective, on theobjective.org yesterday, and opened up with extensive commentary and analysis on the recent developments in North Korea. And when we see optics heretofore unheard of, it's been 70 years since the armistice was signed that was effectively a ceasefire ending the 2.5-year-long Korean conflict, or what historians rightfully call the Korean War. They tried to foist this police action thing on us back at that time, and it worked for a brief period, but let's call it what it is. It was the Korean War. We see that the President Trump administration is neither fearful nor hesitant to conduct back-channel diplomacy completely outside the purview of the mainstream media. And, of course, I'm referring to Mike Pompeo's recent trip to meet with North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un.
And, John, you're right on the money, because I don't know if this is where you were going, but Pompeo had just met with Netanyahu yesterday.
Exactly. And so that is exactly where I was going. And so what we see geopolitically is much like a fulcrum with a seesaw, like a child's toy with a teeter-totter on it. So when the pressure appears to be relieved from the Korean Peninsula, then we see pressure ratchet up in another region. Right now, of course, Syria is the focal point. Your dad, Doug Hagmann, has said for many years on the record that World War III will begin in Korea, and it is certainly the region globally where we have pre-positioned assets of all of the regional and or global superpowers in place. But we also have other hotspots that tend to take a back seat and then they come forward for a day or two. I'm thinking of the ongoing nuclear détente between India and Pakistan and everything that's happened recently with India and their economy. I'm also thinking of the numerous strikes that have been carried out against Syrian military bases and air assets over the past 3 weeks that nobody's really claiming responsibility for. Israel reports on it, nod, nod, wink, wink. Joe, I'll lay this out and hand it back to you. This from the Jerusalem Post, posted just a few moments ago. Netanyahu to address country with dramatic news about Iran Monday night. This is from Jerusalem Post and Reuters. Tamar Ben Ozer. Israeli media reports indicate Netanyahu will address the Iran nuclear deal and not the overnight strike in Syria. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will make a televised announcement Monday evening in what his office said would disclose dramatic news regarding the nuclear agreement with Iran. Now, that serves to echo or underpin your opening commentary. But interestingly, it says, in a corresponding move, Netanyahu canceled a scheduled speech at the Knesset in honor of Theodore Herzl Day. Channel 10 reports Mir bin Shabbat, head of the National Security Council, will hold phone calls with colleagues in the UK and France to update them about developments with the Iranian nuclear program. Now, why is that important? Because what we have here is diplomacy in action, where Israel feels compelled for whatever reason to get on the phone with, of all countries, the UK and France, the other two countries, Joe, that participated in the retaliatory strike against the quote-unquote gas attack in Syria 3 weeks ago.
We have some statements from a few Iranian politicians. One, the Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister, Abbas Arghachi, says nuclear agreement unsustainable regardless of whether or not the U.S. withdraws. And they note that Iran is preparing all necessary options for any scenario. Also, the Iran's Khamenei warns regional rivals over confrontation with Tehran, says they will be defeated. And then there's reports of Israel preparing as well and shutting down airspaces over Syria and whatnot. So I don't know. There was a strike last night that killed at least 26. There are reports that many Iranian soldiers were killed. This from Zero Hedge. Massive fireball lights up Syrian sky after Israeli strike. Dozens of soldiers reportedly killed. And in that piece up on Drudge from Zero Hedge, there are a few video clips where you can see the actual explosion that was caught on video. And this is obviously, again, something we're going to keep our eye on. But Israel fighting Iran in Syria, and it's looking like with the announcements Netanyahu is making that they are preparing for a more broad type of conflict than just in the country of Syria, which hopefully is not the case, but that's what they are seemingly talking about and threatening. So we will continue to follow exactly what is going on there, and we'll have an updated report for you tonight on the Hagmann Report. Now, to what we talked about, North Korea, people are saying, well, President Trump should get a Nobel Peace Prize. We know that Obama got a Peace Prize, and he did not even do anything to deserve it, and just got one as soon as he got into office. And if anything, was as warmongering as any other president with all the drone strikes and the Arab Spring and whatnot. So should the president get a Peace Prize? I think it's too early even to say so. We have to see this agreement, the armistice, the war armistice between the Koreas and the United States, that has to actually be finalized into a peace agreement, and we have to see some progress on the denuclearization. The goal, I mean, it's one thing to say you're going to do these things, but once you finally see it accomplished, I think then would be the proper time to talk about a Nobel Peace Prize. But definitely more significant changes in our relationship with North Korea and the relationship between North and South Korea than we've seen in any time, really, in any of our lifetimes. And my question to the audience out there is, just compared to a few months ago when we saw this rhetoric of nuclear strikes and Kim Jong-un saying how he's going to strike Guam and Hawaii, and you have nuclear alerts going off, and people are going crazy about the rhetoric on Twitter between the president of the United States and the leader of North Korea, to where we are today, where Kim Jong-un has said as long as the U.S. promises not to invade, he will remove and denuclearize the weapons that he has. And he also, in a meeting with the president of South Korea, said some interesting things about how he would never strike South Korea, and on and on and on. So my question is this a real peace? And how is this going to affect the geopolitical situation moving forward? I think it's a great thing, John. What do you think about this? Because we've been talking about the North Korea tensions for a while.
Well, I'm encouraged, and thank you for that question. I'm encouraged because, first of all, North Korea is a regional power that has kept itself insular from the global community really since the early 1950s, and it's at the complete detriment of their population. And I've always had empathy for the North Koreans as a people, because we know that they spend an enormous percentage of their GDP on weaponry, on weapon systems, and they buy them pretty much from whoever will sell them to them, while in many cases the people starve. They live on, this is not hyperbole, they live on rice and rat meat and snakes, and a diet that would certainly turn up the noses of most Westerners. But there's quite a bit more to this. Now, you posed an interesting question a few moments ago. Should we see an actual peace resolution on the Korean Peninsula? Should 45th President Donald Trump receive a Nobel Prize? Well, I have felt for years, this is just my opinion, but I have felt for years like the Nobel Prize is really almost a throwback to the days of yesteryear. I remember Jimmy Carter receiving one for his work with the Palestinians, and that seemed reasonably legitimate. Jimmy Carter, I think most would argue, had a more profound project palette and got more done after his time in the White House than while he served as president. But we need to keep in mind there's a bitter irony about the Nobel Prize, and it is simply this: that Alfred Nobel, for whom the prize is named, was one of the innovators who took us out of the age of nitroglycerin as an industrial explosive and into the age of dynamite. So that I won't go into all the history of that, but Alfred Nobel created the Nobel Prize, but also created one of the most often used explosives in warfare, even to this day. Dynamite is still used to this day with militaries all over the world. So for every Nobel Prize that's been given out to the likes of Barack Obama and the prize money that goes along with that honor, one must ask oneself, where did it all start and where did the money originally come from? And the answer to that is by mixing nitroglycerin with diamescus earth and wrapping it up in paper, and we call that dynamite.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting piece of history. And you mentioned the Korean citizens, and that's my question here. Secondary to how this is going to affect the international community is how this is going to affect the citizens of North Korea. Are we going to see some relief there for these people? And my fear is we won't, and that's really a shame. But what you can only do so much. We can't be the world's policeman. But we'll continue to follow this story, and it's not getting the coverage it deserves on many of the networks, but it is a huge accomplishment, and we should be proud of the president for getting us onto a area where we have not before, of peace with North Korea and the peace between North and South Korea, most importantly. I want to kind of switch gears here because we got about 10 minutes before we're going to bring Liz on. Where is the National Guard? Caravan of illegals hits the U.S. border, and they're climbing the fence. This is an article from the Right Scoop off the Liberty Daily. Breaking: migrant caravan hits border and they're climbing the fence. And this article goes to, and we've seen articles all week about this asylum seekers from Central America who walked through Mexico demanding that the United States accept them and give them citizens. So they've reached the border and they're crossing. I mean, where is the border security? I don't get this, John.
Well, if you're part of the National Guard under your statewide commander-in-chief, Governor Jerry Brown, you're probably up in Northern California making sure that nobody errantly shoots the spotted white barn owl while out deer hunting. I mean, we reported 2 weeks ago that whereas Arizona and Texas were fully willing to comply with it's not even a mandate per se out of D.C. What it really is, I mean, let's call it what it is. It's a deal. It's the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security saying, okay, Arizona, okay, Texas, we're going to give you X number of additional federal dollars to put X number of thousands of National Guardsmen on the border. We know that California Governor Jerry Brown sent what I would call something between a snarky and snotty letter back to General Mattis indicating that he is more than happy to comply, but then as he enumerated what his definition of comply is, it was indicative that he currently has 55 National Guardsmen on the southern border between San Diego and Mexico. So I would assume that those 55 are not where all these migrants are that are sitting atop the fence for this massive photo optic that hit the news cycle early this morning.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things, a lot of different reports that we're seeing. The website, The Right Scoop, that I was just looking at, has a few Twitters that they're highlighting on and looking at, and they've come to the conclusion that the people who are coming from these Latin American countries are communists because some of them call themselves international workers, which is code word for a communist group of people, but I don't know that to be true. That's just from one person's Twitter feed who said that they're an international worker, which is code for, again, a communist organization. But I think I need to see more than one person saying it, but it would not surprise me. But there were reports that some of the people are being allowed to cross. Up to 50 people could enter the U.S. at one area crossing. Another group of 300 people trying to cross in Tijuana was told that they're at capacity and they're not allowed to cross. My question is, why aren't these people just turned away, especially if they say that their intent is to come here and stay here? Why are these people being given status above other illegal immigrants who are trying to enter the United States illegally? This open borders globalist policy that we have seen for so many years needs to stop, and the judiciary and the political progressives have been successful in stopping the agenda that Trump has tried to put in place from a border wall to greater security to the travel ban and on and on and on. And now we see these lines of people, walking together, demanding citizenship, and the Congress is thwarting the president's agenda to stop this pouring of criminals and everything else.
Joe, they're hedging their bets as we move into a contentious, vexatious midterm. There are a lot of incumbent Republican congressmen and women who need to hold their seat. They need the Latino vote in places like Arizona and California to do so. And unless you've lived in these areas, as have I, it's easy to forget that most Latinos who are either born here in the United States or who come over legally, and there's millions of them, are actually some of the most vocal proponents of building the wall and of controlling our immigration scenario writ large. So this is, I think, sort of a neutral analysis paralysis on the part of Congress. And frankly, I don't expect anything better from them unless the American people apply good old-fashioned pressure, which for some reason people are so hesitant to do. And Joe, I know we've got Liz coming up momentarily, but this will be dead in the news by tomorrow, and I want to make sure we hit it today. Washington Examiner, Trump, White House Correspondents' Dinner is dead as we know it. Now, President Trump tweeted out early this morning, the White House Correspondents' Dinner is dead, in all caps, as we know it. This was a total disaster and an embarrassment to our great country and all that it stands for. Fake news is alive and well and beautifully represented on Saturday night. Joe, did you have a chance to review the White House Correspondents' Dinner?
I saw just bits and pieces of it, mostly just of the, who is it, Michelle Wolf, what was highlighted on Drudge yesterday. And, I don't know. This has been historically an event where journalists and entertainers, comedians and whatnot come together, and usually the president's there, and it's supposed to be a fun, lighthearted night. And we've seen all of any political and civil decency we had in political discourse was thrown out the window during the 2016 presidential election, and that has carried over into these other events, from award shows in Hollywood to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Anytime you get these liberal lunatics in a room together and give them a microphone, this is what they do best. And some of it, I have a twisted sense of humor, so I thought some of it was funny. Which
some of
most
it was
people
funny.
probably won't, but some of the, obviously the abortion stuff and some of the other tasteless humor that was in there is uncalled for, and many are saying that this has turned into a mean-spirited a type of attack that is completely uncalled for. Some people want apologies, other people thought it was fine. So obviously it just shows where we are at politically as far as the divide in this country when you see things like this.
Completely agreed. And, the sad thing about the administration's absence from the White House Correspondents' Dinner is, as you said, Joe, going all the way back to the late 19th century, it's historically an opportunity for one side to roast the other, to get some laughs, and even to get some lowbrow kind of dirty laughs. I mean, it was at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and this irritated me. I'm sure it did you as well, where George W. Bush infamously said he was still looking for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and he looked under the podium, and he turned around and looked under the cushion of the chair on the dais. And I don't think that earned him too many political points, too much political capital from the conscientious right at that time. But what we had with Michelle Wolf and this particular Correspondents' Dinner was really it was lowbrow, it was profane, it was smart alecky. I very much disappreciated the cheapening of something as serious as abortion in this country. But I'll tell you, the other thing that personally bothered me, and I sent this tweet out in real time while the Correspondents' Dinner was happening. Sarah Sanders, help me out, the speaker, the White House public relations speaker,
Sarah Huckabee Sanders,
the director. Give me her job title.
Press secretary.
Yeah, the press secretary. Thank you. She sat there by herself. She looked lovely. She had on a very pretty dress, and she had her hair all swept back in an unusual manner that we're not accustomed to seeing every day. And she was really taking one shovel handle across the face after another. I mean, this Michelle Wolf chick was just brutalized Sarah Sanders, and I think that she's been a good sport overall, although she does from time to time hit back. But I would love, and I mean love, to have seen little loudmouth, vulgar Michelle Wolf try to take on Stephen Miller if he'd been sitting there, because I'll tell you what, that would have been one serious Donnybrook, and it would have made the entire Correspondents' Dinner a lot more interesting.
Well, one of the things is, with this Correspondents' Dinner that's supposed to happen is you're supposed to have, as you mentioned and pointed out, you had President Bush attend the dinner. You had presidents past always attend this dinner. I mean, not every time, but it usually was. That's how it goes. And when you see the administration is far removed from events like this, especially when you think of Donald Trump and how he's, they like to say he's an attention hog because he's a reality TV show star or whatever. But wouldn't that make sense that he would want to attend things like this to grab that attention? And why is he shying away, or why would he not participate in events like this? And he put out a tweet: "The White House Correspondents' Dinner is dead as we know it. This was a total disaster and an embarrassment to our great country and all that it stands for. Fake news is alive and well and is beautifully represented on Saturday night." And this article goes through to talk about the jokes that Michelle Wolf issued against Sanders and Kellyanne Conway and others. And it is, some of it's very vulgar. And there is a piece here in the Washington Examiner where it goes on to talk about the White House Correspondents Association said it had to regret choosing Wolf. And then it goes on to highlight a joke that she said. But, all in all, it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be lighthearted. But this, did it go too far? I don't know. It's a question that each and every individual has to ask for themselves. But let's do this. Let's bring on Liz. And John, go ahead. If you want to, will I bring her on?
I've just got something quickly to cover while we bring our guest Liz Crokin on. And can't wait to she's got cooking. Liz really stands at the front line of defending the defenseless, something that we're very committed to at the Hagmann Report. But Joe?
Hey, Liz.
Hey, Liz.
Hi,
welcome
guys.
to the Hagmann Daily Show. Our guest is Liz Crokin. She joins us live from the West Coast. Liz, thanks for joining us so early.
No problem.
Liz Crokin's easy to find, lizcrokin.com. That's LIZCROKIN.com. Liz, I was just getting ready to cover a quick piece, and then we're going to hand it to you.
Sure.
This is from thefederalist.com, and the headline says, factcheck.org is wrong. California's LGBT therapy ban could ban Bibles. And I'll just give our listeners the first piece of this, and we don't want to detract from your time with us, Liz. Factcheck.org has joined Snopes as another sneaky liar with their article on April 25th entitled, California Bill Wouldn't Ban the Bible. Although, per the editor's note, quote, factcheck.org describes itself as one of several organizations working with Facebook to debunk false stories, end quote. It is not without left-wing bias. Article author Angelo Fischera claims that California Assembly Bill 2943 has no bearing on the sale, not only, who wrote this? Is like a sixth grader wrote this, not only of the Bible, but also of any Christian book that makes the case, in whole or part, for orientation, identity, or behavior change. Although Fischera asserts claims about AB 2943 banning books, quote, are indeed not supported by the language in this legislation, end quote, he does not actually analyze the contents of the bill. This is a piece from thefederalist.com with no offense intended toward anyone that I would have chosen to stick in the to-do pile if I knew the semantics of the article were so poor. But what this says at the end of the day, listeners, is simply this. Anytime you see factcheck.org, Right Wing Watch, certainly Snopes, they've been discredited, 7 Ways to Sunday. Really use discernment and exercise critical thinking and look at what you're reading, because what I just tried to read to you in pedantic 6th grade English says that whereas California Assembly Bill 2943 has no bearing on the sale of not only the Bible but any Christian book, it is indeed not supported by language in this legislation indicating that it does not ban the sale of the Bible. So anyway, I wanted to get that piece out. It's incredibly important because we know that California, for better or worse, leads the way that much of the country follows with these progressive policies. And we know, Joe, from Scripture, particularly Deuteronomy 28, when you ban the Bible, you're getting yourself in hot water with the Lord God Almighty. But Joe, Liz, I'm going to hand it to you. Liz, again, welcome to the Hagmann Daily Show.
Thank you. Quite an introduction.
Well, Liz, I was talking with John before the show, and when we were talking about bringing you on, we thought this was a good place to start. Media silent as Allison Mack's arrest exposes child trafficking for billionaire-backed sex slave ring. So can you give us the latest on this very underreported story with these Hollywood people that you really broke a piece that goes well beyond just the sex cult in California with the rich and famous? What's really going on with what we saw this Allison Mack involved in, and what the media is not saying about this?
Well, the most important thing about the arrest of Allison Mack, which no one is reporting, is that she has multiple pending charges for trafficking children. So I encourage everybody to go online right now and Google Allison Mack, and you will find article after article about how she was arrested. But every headline reads that she was arrested for being part of a sex cult, like in cahoots with Keith Raniere, who was the leader, and everything's sugar-coated. No one, to this day, I have not seen one article in the mainstream media that mentions the fact that she was part of not only a sex cult, but a sex cult that was trafficking children. Everyone in the mainstream media is leaving that out. Why? Why would they be leaving that out? Furthermore, Keith Raniere, who was hunted down in Mexico, where he fled to hide from the authorities because he knew that they were after him and he knew he was busted and screwed. After they found him, hunted him down in Mexico and arrested him, he's been arrested and charged of many crimes, and one of those crimes is for engaging in sex with children. And let me correct myself. I shouldn't say engaging in sex. I should say engaging in alleged rape with children. And according to the letter that the New York state's attorney, I believe, wrote, he detailed how he allegedly had sex with minors as young as 12 and 15. And this is just from information from legal documents that have been exposed. There's still a ton of stuff about this case that has not been exposed. And let me tell you, it is bad. And it goes much deeper than Allison Mack and Keith Raniere. This sex cult, which, by the way, wasn't just a sex cult, it was a child sex trafficking ring. It implicates many people, many high players from all walks of life in the elite circles, including Hollywood, DC, billionaires, finance, from people all over the world. And the media refuses to report that. CNN, MSNBC, when Keith Raniere was arrested, they did not even report it. Nothing. Complete silence. The only reason why they started reporting on Nexium, I don't even know how to pronounce it, is because Allison Mack was arrested. And, she's not like a huge A-list celebrity, but she is C/D list. So she was enough to, at least get some mainstream media news. But when the actual leader of this cult that was trafficking children was arrested, nothing. Crickets.
Yeah, and this
Crickets.
article I'm reading goes on to say that the Keith Raniere and Allison Mack are being charged with sex trafficking, conspiracy to commit forced labor, among other charges. And how it goes on to detail how they were collecting sex slaves, and they said this was practicing of collecting collateral from female members, and they allowed these slaves to recruit other slaves. But this is, as you say, Liz, this is not the primary issue. The real issue is the pedophilia and the sex trafficking. Some of these, obviously, when you're talking about the people who engage in these type of things, they are not. You have some who are doing so willingly, and you have others, especially, obviously, all the people who are minors who are not choosing to do so. And that's where this story really breaks off, because the mainstream media is covering this as though, oh, this was people who joined this cult with their sound mind, and they made their own decisions, and it's really not that bad, nothing to see here.
Exactly.
But there's that whole other aspect to that of child sex trafficking and forced sexual slave labor. That's really bad. And the bail for her, she has a $5 million bond.
Mm-hmm.
That's very high.
Yeah, and guess what? Someone paid it.
Yeah.
Someone paid it, which isn't surprising, because this cult is connected to people that are very tight with the Clintons, famous heiresses, Richard Branson. There are people around the world that are some of the biggest power players in elite circles that are connected to this cult. So it's no shock that she was able to get bail. What's scary is that there are so many people involved in this cult that are names that would shock you. People we know, people we've seen on TV, people that, we think are so great and they seem so cool on TV and like they're charitable and they're doing all this great stuff. They're involved.
Well, Liz, when will we
not
get
a
to
sex
see those
cult,
names?
but they're involved in a child sex trafficking ring. And that's really like the epicenter and like the pinpoint of the story, because the mainstream media is trying to paint it as, oh, it's a sex cult and who cares if people of age decide to do X, Y, and Z with their sex lives. And honestly, I don't care. If you're not hurting children and you're doing things legally behind closed doors, and good for you. I may not agree with it, but if you're not hurting children and if you're not doing anything illegal, then good for you. But that's not the case. These people were recruiting children and they were raping them. They were molesting them. And they were pawning them off to rich elites.
Liz, let me ask you this. You and I have known this for a long time, and I'm grateful that your work and my work, both independently as well as with the Hagmann Report, is starting to pay dividends with a broader public awareness. But Liz, over the weekend, you posted a brilliant interview with our counterpart and a dear friend of the Hagmann Report, and of course, I'm speaking of Sean from SGT
Oh, he's
Report.
so great.
We love him too, and the only thing tough about Sean is I want him on the show all the time, and he's such a busy guy. We get him about once every 8 weeks, but we always enjoy him when we do have him on.
Yeah.
Liz, I was wondering, we've got plenty of time. We've got about 25 minutes. Mm-hmm. I was hoping that we could talk briefly about the broader picture in Hollywood vis-a-vis Kanye West, where we know that the ninefold contract exists. Professor Griff from for some reason I'm having the drawing blanks on names today. I just wrote an article about it last night. Public Enemy.
Oh.
Griff from Public Enemy has been talking about the ninefold contract forever. He did a great interview with John B. Wells on Coast to Coast several years back, indicating that individuals like Kanye sign a contract, and because you can only fold an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper 9 times, regardless of how much of an origami expert you may be, that they call it this ninefold contract because it effectively means once you sign the line, they own you. Now, there's all this supposition out there as to what happened with Kanye West, but when we look at this NXIVM story, it seems like there's certainly bridges between the two vis-a-vis child trafficking, because we know that often a big part of these ninefold contracts is getting these up-and-coming hip-hop stars, these rap stars, into compromising positions, typically sexually compromising positions, and unfortunately, oftentimes those will involve children. That being said, Liz, I'm going to hand it to you. Let's talk a little bit. I'd just love to hear your rundown. Give us a summary on Kanye West at this time.
Yeah, exactly. So I've known Kanye West for a very long time. I'm from Chicago. He's from Chicago. I ran the gossip column in Chicago for the Red Eye edition of the Chicago Tribune for about 7 years. And during that time, he was in Chicago. I've been to events with him at many occasions. And, I've met him. I've hung out with him. I've been friends with him. My like when I say friends, I don't even know if he would remember me, but we've hung out together in the same circles. One of my best friends is actually very close with him. You know, I've been backstage at his concerts, physically in his dressing room and hanging out with him. And he's actually a really nice guy, really down to earth, completely opposite from some of what you've seen of him on television. When I say that, I'm referring to, you know, situations like his outburst at the VMAs when he went on stage, and that whole debacle happened with Taylor Swift. That's not Kanye West at all. He's actually a very nice guy, very chill, very reserved, really sweet, like the nicest guy in the world. And, you know, Kanye West a few months ago or it was right after President Trump got elected, he had, you could call it an outburst, or he went on a rant, whatever you want to call it, but he went on stage at one of his concerts, and he openly talked about things that the deep state doesn't want people like him talking about. For example, he said Jay-Z has murderers. He said, I'm on my Trump stuff. He was exposing stuff about the tech industries, stuff that me as a journalist that's been covering the tech industries and people like Jay-Z for many, many years knows is true. And after he exposed these truths, that I was shocked that he would even dare to go there. And by the way, within this, you know, rant or whatever you want to call it, and by the way, your listeners can go on YouTube right now and they can Google it and they can find exactly what I'm talking about on YouTube, because I believe it's still up and available. Within like 24 or 36 hours of this happening, he was thrown in a psych ward. And when he was thrown in a psych ward, one of my very dear friends and very close friends was in constant contact with his, I think, only relative that was with him when this happened. And he called her as he was being arrested, or I don't know if they arrested him or just paramedics came and they bound. I don't know how it all went down, but they you know, paramedics, authorities, some kind of authorities came and they, against his will, took him on a 5150 hold and they threw him in a psych ward. There was at least one family member with him when this happened. And one of my closest friends is good friends with this person. And he called her as this was happening. And I was with her either that night or the next day. And I didn't even know any of this had happened. And we just happened to be at an event together right after this happened. And she literally started crying hysterically in my lap, just crying, tears. And she was like, you don't understand. Like, they're going after Kanye. They're targeting him. I think they drugged him. Like, they threw him in the psych ward. They're trying to take away his kids. Like there's no way he had this meltdown. He's not erratic. He's not crazy. He's targeted. He is targeted. I mean, she looked me in the eye, shaking uncontrollably with tears in her eyes. And she said this to me. And this is a girl that I've known for probably 15 years. And I trust her and I believe her. And she has literally no reason to lie. And she believed that he was targeted. And after I learned what he said in this concert, which was the last public appearance that he had before he was apprehended and thrown in the psych ward, it made perfect sense to me why he was targeted. Because he was exposing things about the deep state and people like Jay-Z, people involved in spirit cooking. He was talking positively about Trump. He was exposing the deep state and like the tech companies and how all these forces are lying to us. They're evil. They're bad people. And he even said that Jay-Z has killers. And I've actually personally, as a journalist, I've covered stories about Jay-Z with women that have claimed to have had affairs with Jay-Z. And like right before I was about to do a big interview with them, they died at the age of 28 under very shady and mysterious circumstances.
Yeah, and we know this type of stuff happens, unfortunately, too often in these entertainment circles. And one thing that's really frustrating is about this is Kanye West is not even agreeing with the politics of the president. All he is saying is that he has the right to support the president, that he likes him, and that he's allowed to think individually. He doesn't have to have this hive mindset that these other people do. And this is the problem. They instantly go after Kanye West and his mental health, and they try to bring up those things and issues in the past. I read that he talked about his own addiction to painkillers and what he went through with that. So, and if he's on the other side of that, then I don't have any concerns about his mental health, but that's what they're trying to make it about. And it's unfortunate that the liberal media will tear down anybody and everybody who comes out in support of the president. It doesn't matter what even their own personal politics is. And we see this, trend developing too often. But Liz, we only got a few minutes left. I want to ask you this: what are you working on right now? What are your investigations focusing on? What do you have coming up here in the near future?
Well, honestly, I just focus on whatever's happening in the moment. Like my primary focus is exposing the child sex trafficking and taking down the elite pedophile Satanists. So I literally stay online all day and I track all the arrests that are happening. And they're happening. And they've been happening since the day President Trump was sworn into office. So I track all of those arrests every single day. And so that's what I focus on. But, there's a lot of people that follow Q and they support President Trump. And they really want to see people like Hillary Clinton and John Podesta go to jail. And they're upset and frustrated because it hasn't happened yet. And a lot of them are like, oh, I don't see any arrests. Nothing's happening, blah, 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 blah. Well, that's wrong. That's totally false. And if people actually follow someone like me, they would know that that's false because there have been actually many arrests with very high profile pedophiles and sex traffickers such as Allison Mack, Keith Raniere. There was many people that were arrested last year, people that were involved in Jerry Sandusky's pedophile ring, Jacob Schwartz, who was a top staffer for Bill de Blasio. We had an assistant DA, I believe. I think it was Gordon Liddy in California. I mean, there's been so many high profile people in government, politicians, celebrities that have been arrested, but they haven't been super A-list, and they haven't been people like John Podesta or Hillary Clinton. So people, are up in arms and they're frustrated and they're thinking that nothing's happening, and the takedown of the deep state's not really happening, and all these sealed indictments are a hoax. But that's not true. It is happening, but what needs to happen for the big fish to get caught is that they need to start from the bottom. They can't just arrest Hillary Clinton. They just can't arrest John Podesta because that would cause mass chaos. There's so many people that have no idea. I mean, there's so many people that A, don't even have any idea that Hillary Clinton is a bad person. B, let alone know that she's literally involved in trafficking children. So
yeah, they're building the case.
Exactly.
They're building the case. Liz, forgive me. We've got just a couple minutes left, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask your opinion on this. Now, when we do talk about nailing big A-listers, the big fish, if you will, very recognizable people. Of course, late last week, we had the verdict come down here in Pennsylvania regarding Bill Cosby and the alleged 40-plus years of basically being a serial rapist. Now, this from page6.com. Stacey Brown over at Page 6 writes, Bill Cosby is mentally preparing himself for prison. His attorneys might still be squawking about innocence and appeals, but Bill Cosby is mentally preparing himself for prison. Quote, "This is what they wanted," the comedian, once revered as America's dad, told Page Six after a Pennsylvania jury found him guilty Thursday of drugging and sexually assaulting Andrea Constand. When he arrived at his suburban Philadelphia home after court, he was greeted at the door by another victim, that's in quotes, victim, his wife and most loyal supporter, Camille. She gave him a hug and kiss, said a source who was present. Liz, with the few moments we have remaining, and thank you so much for your gift of time. I know it's early on the West Coast. What's your take on Bill Cosby, and how does this play into the hashtag #MeToo movement?
Well, I mean, I'm always happy when any sexual predator is taken down. I was a victim myself, and that's why I do the work I do. But I will say that, unfortunately, the media has used people like Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein and Jerry Sandusky as distractions for what the bigger problem is in not only Hollywood and DC, but around the world. And the biggest problem that we are facing in the world is the rape, torture, and sacrifice of kids. And the whole Me Too movement, the whole Time's Up movement is nothing but a front to distract from the fact that these people are actually raping, torturing, sacrificing kids. And, there's going to be some people that listen to this and it's going to upset them. And look, I was a victim of a sexual assault, and I'm all about exposing all kinds of sexual predators. But the people that are coordinating these movements, for example, CAA, these are corporations that have covered up for not only rapists,
now, for our listeners,
child sex
quickly,
traffickers.
CAA, just for our listeners, that's Creative Artists Agency.
Right.
It's the biggest A-lister factory in the world. But go ahead, Liz.
Right, and if you study CAA and you just look in aerial view from the building, you'll see there's like satanic symbolism and Illuminati symbolism all over it. But unfortunately, they have used this as an excuse to hopefully appease the masses and distract from the real problem. And the real problem in Hollywood is the satanic and ritualistic abuse of children. And you'll notice that at every single award show, all these actors and producers and publicists and whoever walked the red carpet for literally every single red carpet event wore black, Me Too, and Time's Up and all this crap. Not one of them have mentioned child sex trafficking or pedophilia. Not one. So what they're trying to do, and when I say they, I'm talking about places like CAA, who have actively covered up for serial rapists and pedophiles for literally decades, okay? Courtney Love spoke out about Harvey Weinstein many, many years ago, and immediately after she did that, CAA blacklisted her. So what they're trying to do is they're hoping that, okay, the public's starting to figure out that almost everyone in Hollywood is a pervert, a predator, or a pedophile. Let's just try to appease them, let them just think that the worst people in Hollywood are just, Harvey Weinstein rapists, which is horrible. But actually, the bigger problem in Hollywood is that there are many people in Hollywood that are raping children. It's systematic. It's in the movie industry. It's in the television industry. It's in the music industry. It's systematic. It's been going on forever. Corey Feldman's been talking about it forever. Roseanne Barr's been talking about it forever. And it's not only like the rape and torture and trafficking and like sometimes sacrifice of these kids, but it's also the mind control. And that's the bigger issue in Hollywood, and that's a deeper issue. So these movements are just kind of like, a distraction from what the bigger problem is.
And you're right on the money that they are just there. I mean, it's no coincidence the timing of from the initial Pizzagate to Pedogate to these revelations of this widespread problem throughout the entertainment industry. It's no coincidence that this other movement, with some of the same people being accused of doing things to children, coming out and speaking against sexual harassment, that has also been going on unreported in Hollywood for forever, but it is covering up the bigger problem that we were starting to get to the root of, which was the pedophilia and child angle of this. And it's a very dark and disturbing picture. Folks, visit Liz at her website, lizcroken.com, and you can find her on social media. And we thank her for coming on. Liz, thank you so much for coming on today. We'll have you back on again in the future, and keep up the great work.
Oh, thanks, guys. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, Liz. We love you. Folks, you can follow Liz on Twitter, really for some of the most breaking stories regarding defending the defenseless, sticking up for children. When she said she spends her days tracking this stuff down like an internet sleuth, she wasn't kidding, and brings over 20 years of mainstream journalist capability and prowess to her activities. You can follow her on Twitter at Liz Crokin, at LizCrokin. Joe?
Excuse me. Just want to talk about our sponsor here as well, Simply Clean Foods, simplycleanfoods.net. We had Chance on last week, and he talked about the free water filtration straws for buying 2 packs of strawberries. And to get that deal, you got to call them at 737-400-2066. That's 737-400-2066. Also, there are a bunch of other great deals there, from the coffee to the storable food, GMO-free, veteran Christian-owned company. That's simplycleanfoods.net. Use promo code SimplyClean, and you can support us by supporting our sponsors over there at Simply Clean Foods. Want to also talk about an interview we have tonight, an explosive interview we're going to be doing with Diamond and Silk. You're not going to want to miss that on Hagmann Report. That segment will start at 7:30, and we have a great show beyond that with Peter Chauka and one of our favorites returning, Randall Terry, and he is a expert on Islam and is going to be talking to us about the documentary film that he just completed, as well as a number of other things that he sees going on with the Middle East. So you're not going to want to miss the Hagmann Report tonight. It's going to be a great show. Any closing thoughts, John? Did I lose you?
Forgive me. I was slow on the unmute. No, I just want to say a very special Hagmann Report thank you to Tammy, who represents Diamond and Silk. Thank you so much for spending the time you did with me this weekend to put together a phenomenal interview. Listeners, you do not want to miss the Hagmann Report this evening. Right out of the gate with Diamond and Silk, it's explosive. Doug was on fire, Joe was on fire, and then of course we will have a Hagmann regular, a favorite, Randall Terry. What Would Muhammad Do? And then our third hour with media analysis and commentary by Peter Chauka.
Yeah, and again, just as a last-minute reminder here, keep your eyes on what's going on between Israel and Iran. I'm looking right now where the President Netanyahu gave an address with dramatic news about the Iranian nuclear deal, but there were strikes last night in Syria that we're dealing with between Israel and Iran in Syria, and there are announcements being made on the heels of Mike Pompeo going over and meeting with Netanyahu. So there was some interesting stuff with the Israeli stock market too that we're watching, but we're going to continue to keep our eyes on this moving forward, and we have a great week lined up for you both here on the Hagmann Daily Show and at the Hagmann Report. So with that said, we are at the end of the show. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and thanks to Liz. It was an informative interview, but we'll be back here tomorrow. Until then, have a great day. Hagmann Report tonight.
The Hagmann Daily Show is brought to you by the Hagmann Report. Tune in to the Hagmann Report weekdays, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, go to HagmannReport.com. That's HagmannReport.com.